All right, speaking of the school opening this morning, Alberta's Premier had this to say about the meeting.
Our officials have been working all weekend. Ours have. I know the federal governments have been too, analyzing the decision, trying to map out different strategies to go forward in a way that respects the principles that have been identified, but also gets construction resumed in a timely way. Because we absolutely cannot be held hostage to a regulatory merry-go-round that never ends. We must.
Words resonated in the province's political realm. We reached out to the Alberta Premier and her cabinet ministers on the file, and they all declined our request for an interview. But a man the polls suggest could be the next Premier is joining us. United Conservative leader Jason Kenney connects with us from Calgary. Mr. Kenney, I'm curious. Justin Trudeau's meeting with the Premier. I'm wondering, what do you hope? What is your big hope that he's going to say to her, and what could make you happy?
Well, I hope he says he's going to immediately appeal this terrible decision to the Supreme Court of Canada, that he's going to pass Senator Black's bill S-245 immediately in the House of Commons to declare Trans Mountain as being for the common advantage using that special constitutional power. I hope he tells her that he's going to withhold the $1.5 billion discretionary dollars that he's promised John Horgan's NDP government, as long as that government continues to support these legal delay tactics. I hope he says that he's going to pull back and delete Bill C-69 that's now before the Senate. That would basically make it impossible to get another pipeline built in the future. That's just for starters, Don.
Okay, that's a bit of a shopping list. But, you know, he's faced with this court ruling, Mr. Kenney, and it basically says you haven't consulted enough on tanker traffic, you haven't consulted enough on Indigenous people. How do you ignore that order from the bench and not go back and start some of these processes over again?
Well, they're going to have to do that as well, obviously. You know, I have to be honest with you, Don. You know, I'm a big critic of the Trudeau government, and I think they're policies that have hurt Canada's energy industry. But I frankly do not blame them on this one point about consultation. I think the Crown did its best to meet the ever-moving legal standard. I mean, here's the judge basically said, yeah, the government met its obligation of consultation on 3 of the 4 phases, but on 1 phase, they only listened, they didn't talk enough. I mean, please, we need the Supreme Court to look at this in the context of the real world. You know, I was hosting a tailgate party at the Labor Day Classic on Monday, wearing a pro-oil sands shirt, and an Aboriginal Albertan came up to me and said, "I thank you for wearing that. I work in the oil sands up in the Curl project." He said, "I'm so upset with this judgment. Why don't they ever listen to us, the majority of pro-development First Nations people?" And that's what we need the courts to do, not just to listen, in this case, to the Squamish community, which isn't even close to the pipeline route, but to all of the First Nations communities along the Trans Mountain Pipeline who support it. They've been partners of it for 65 years. They want to move their people from poverty to prosperity. We need the legal system to listen to those Aboriginal people as well, and the Crown to consult with them, not just the anti-voices.
I don't know if it's window dressing or not, but some people talk about emergency recalling of Parliament to talk about it, and there's talk about building the pipeline to the Alberta-BC border in anticipation that it'll get the green light someday. Are those grandstanding moves, or are they realistic ones that should be considered?
No, they're not grandstanding moves. Look, this is existential for at least Alberta's economy. This is about what we are as a country. It's not just about a pipeline. It's about whether or not we are an economic union, whether we can build major infrastructure, whether we work as a country. And so that's why I've been advocating measures like that for well over a year.
I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about the mood of Albertans. I have a lot of friends still there, as you know, and there seems to be a fury in the land.
Yeah, that's accurate, Don. I've told you before that in the past year or so, I've heard more serious alienation and even separatist sentiment coming from people that I never would have expected. I don't just mean, you know, somebody's stereotypical redneck. I'm hearing this from educated, professional, urban women who are just saying the country isn't working anymore. And I understand that frustration. You know, Albertans have contributed massively to the rest of the Federation, about $20 billion net on average each year through equalization and other transfers. And all we ask for is the ability to develop the resources that produce that wealth that is shared across the country. And we feel like everywhere we turn, even though we play by the rules, even though we have the highest environmental, human rights, and labor standards of any major oil producer on earth, we feel that we are just being defamed and boxed in. A lot of this started with a foreign-funded campaign coordinated by the Rockefeller Brothers Fund a decade ago, involving a lot of these organizations that funded the litigation that resulted in the Federal Court of Appeal decision. So really, I think Albertans have a sense of being under siege, and we're trying to direct that frustration in a positive direction in the next election.
Very quickly, though, when does alienation tip into separatist sentiment? I mean, there's a gray area, but I've lived through it before. It never really took root, but it is a danger that's always lurking there. Do you sense it could rise?
Yeah, I'm sure it has risen. I don't think anybody's done polling on this in the past couple of years, but I would not be surprised if a significant and growing minority of Albertans are entertaining that. I don't think it's a look, I'm a Canadian nationalist, and by the way, separating ourselves from the rest of the country is not how we're going to get market access, but still, that frustration is real, and that's why I say at the very least, if we can't get market access for Canada's largest export, then I would be prepared to hold a referendum on equalization, Section 36 of the Constitution. I think that's Alberta's ultimate leverage in the Federation. According to the Supreme Court's Quebec secession reference, that would force binding negotiations with the federal government. So I intend for a future Alberta Conservative government to play ball and asserting I think our fair demand for fairness for within the Federation.
Interesting. All right, Jason Kenney, always appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you.
Thanks, Don.